everyone. This is the Hardcore Marketing Show. My name is Casey Cheshire, and today's show is sponsored by Cheshire Impact, BAM, helping you maximize marketing automation to CRM, CheshireImpact.com. Now, I am super excited about today's guest. I feel so unworthy that you're joining us here. This is Adele Revella. She is amazing. She is, now a couple stats for you, the founder and the CEO of the Buyer Persona Institute. She literally wrote the book on buyer personas. Any guesses? It's called Buyer Personas. Her Twitter is literally Buyer Persona. And can I say literally any more times in the next 60 seconds? I don't know. Okay, one more time. The name that literally everyone tells me when I talk about buyer personas and getting to understand your buyer is Adele. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Casey, for having me and for that very enthusiastic introduction.
Well, that's how we roll, right? We'll be throwing down the gauntlets, pretty short order. So thank you for coming. I just want to remind everyone the theme for this month around the success index for marketing automation, how to really maximize marketing automation before you build that campaign, you automate that process, click send on that email. You got to know who you're talking to. You got to know your buyer. And so many times we just go ahead and do some activity. We're not thinking about who's on the receiving end of that, selfishly even sometimes. So what I wanted to do was bring in here literally Adele to talk about more about understanding the buyer. And so, one of the things I wanted to start with is, almost along the lines of, this is hardcore marketing. I want the truth and I can handle the truth. What is the truth about buyer personas? Because they're so popular, and I've been marketing for so long that quite literally, they have said literally again, it is the thing that everyone talks about. But I think when you get so much hype, it turns into this hazy cloud of everyone throwing their 2 cents in, and people talking about their buyer, and I might even say give them a name, but we're not really sure what else do you even put on a profile. And I'm sure there's a lot of myths. I don't know if you want to crush any of those right now off the get-go.
Yeah. Let me just start with that. Thanks for the throwing down the gauntlet there, Casey, because I'm up for it, which is that most of what passes for buyer personas going around is just really useless. And it's so sad. It's why I wrote the book. Honestly, writing a book was the last thing I ever wanted to do. I mean, it was the worst year of my whole life writing that book.
I'm doing that now. It's torture.
It's torture. I just rather have bamboo shoots under my fingernails. But I was so concerned about the, like you said, hype and frankly BS going around. Sit in a room. And this is all the BS. Sit in a room and just sort of think about your buyer and write it down in a template, and then get a picture and give them a name, and you're good to go. And I'm like, because this is not a buyer persona. This is a buyer profile at best.
Okay.
And so I want to just start out by making the distinction between profiling a person who could be your buyer. That's fine. And understanding their journey, understanding their decision, understanding what you need to do to have them say, yeah, I should think about solving this problem. I should think about solving it with you. And at the end of the day, I should buy from you. And knowing whether they have a dog and 2 cats and 3 kids and what they do after work, or even how they spend their day.
Blood type.
Fine.
None of that matters, huh?
But at the end of the day, it's like, how are you going to sell whatever you're marketing to these people? How are you going to be helpful to your buyer? Because that's really the purpose. So we just got to get over it that this is about talking about us. That's like not helpful.
Totally.
And we've got to say, okay, what are we going to do to help reduce the friction in the buying experience for buyers? And so if we get to the purpose of buyer personas, then we can start to see how insane it is to think that having a picture assigned to a name, to a profile, is actually going to make a difference.
So there's a real difference between a profile, almost like FBI profiler, and then persona, as we're talking about buyer.
Yeah, well, FBI profiler would actually probably be more valuable, because when the FBI goes in to profile people, they're profiling them in the context of some action And that's what, I mean, it's like persona is a profile, but a buyer persona means it's got to be about the buying context.
Right. Not just the person, but under the context or in the context of what they're doing to that goal, to that purpose. Okay, so it's focused.
And why they're doing it.
Yeah,
and why they're doing it. And like what's going on in their mind, and how do they come to these, conclusions, the conclusions that buyers are reaching out there every single day that they should or shouldn't do business with us. And we want to get inside, a persona gets inside that mindset, and so that we can then go in and influence them and influence that mindset. But if we don't know someone, walking in the door and saying, hey, you know what, Casey, I just really think you need to, eat better, exercise more. And you probably have had those thoughts, but are you going to change because I tell you that you should do that?
Well, it's January, so I'm still in that mode, right?
Right. It's January, right? And this is the one time of year I could probably persuade you around that. But,
yes.
But for the companies that are listening to this today,
right?
We're probably not just selling fitness gear, or at least that isn't the only one listening to this call. Right. And we need to figure out what is happening in our buyers' minds. And that's a lot more involved in that than just profiling who is the person.
It sounds like, and I'm probably guilty of this too, we can get distracted by the easy things. I can pick a name, Mandy. I can pick a cool photo that represents a marketing manager at a software company, and maybe even figure out that she likes peppermint mocha lattes. But that's not, to your point, that's great. You've done this, but that's so surface level. It's probably like an iceberg, right? Great, you see the little tip top, but there's so much more below that.
Yeah. It's not only so surface level. There's my dog. It's not even so surface level. It's so missing the point. And I tell you, this is the main thing. People have to stop and think about that. Marketing has really changed fundamentally in the decades that I've been in it. In that, in the past, buyers were really kind of at our mercy. They had to work hard to come to us to get the information they needed.
True. Yeah.
And now buyers are kind of like, hey, listen, if I can't get the information I need easily from you, I'm going to go get it from someone else.
Right.
And so just the basic premise that the reason we're doing this isn't to understand our buyer, it's to understand how to be useful to our buyer, how to give them the information they need to choose us. And yet, inside our companies, we're really doing just a different version of what we've been doing for decades before buyers changed the roles. And just sitting around thinking, well, we want to sell more of X and we want to sell more of Y, and we want to get out our message that we're the best at X and Y. And we want. And nobody has the ability to sit in that meeting room and say, but what does the buyer want?
Right. What do they actually want? Instead of our own talking about ourselves, writing white papers about ourselves, to ourselves, writing content for ourselves, does nothing. You're right. It's more than surface level. You're right. It's missing the point completely. You might as well not even have a photo or a name if you don't understand underlying reasoning. So that really clears up a lot. That profile persona. Is there any other myths going around about buyer personas, or is that the big one that people are all about the cutesy stuff and they're not really understanding the buyer? And I know we'll get to how to understand the buyer in a second.
Yeah. So there's one other myth going around, and it's related, and it is that because it's related to this concept. If you start with profiles, then you immediately end up with too many personas. Because now you can think of, well, do I need a profile? I mean, Casey, do we have B2B and B2C people listening today, or is it
mostly B2B? Yeah.
Okay. So, the great example in B2B is, hey, listen, I sell to companies at different sizes, so I need different size. I need personas for different sizes. Geez. I sell to people in different industries. I need a persona for every industry. I sell to different job titles influencing the buying decision. And before long, even a small company can end up with 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 personas. That is a huge myth.
Good, because it's scary. It's scaring me. I'm getting all nervous over here.
It's a huge myth. And it's really, again, if we get back to what our goal is, to figure out how to be helpful to buyers. And if we really start with, okay, learning what's helpful to buyers and encoding that in a persona, then we start to realize that what we need to do to be helpful to different types of buyers doesn't really vary that much. And we don't really need that many personas.
How do you chop it up?
Well, so that now you want to get into the how-to, because we'll do that.
Well, just, instead of 18, I get it. Don't have 18, but...
So what you first have to do is you have to understand what questions buyers are asking, what's going on in their mind through that journey. And then you realize that even though people that are in different industries and in different company sizes and in different geographies, and many times with different titles, because B2B companies, businesses are very consensus driven.
Sure.
Is we start to realize that, literally, I mean, we literally, you wanted a story. So we did a study for a very, very, very large technology company. I won't say who it is, very large, one of the probably 25 largest tech companies in the world.
Sure.
Selling B2B.
Yep.
And we interviewed buyers across 8 industries, public and private sector, across the U.S., the UK, and Germany. And we asked them to talk to us about what they need to do. These were directors of IT around the particular buying decision our client wanted to influence. And at the end of the day, so think of that. Okay, 3 countries, 8 industries, 1 job title, 3 times 8, 24. This company could have easily concluded that they needed 24 buyer personas.
Sure.
After we looked at the questions they asked and what they wanted to know and how our client could answer those questions in a way that was compelling, guess how many buyer personas we had?
3? 1?
1.
Wow.
1.
The industry didn't matter. The geo didn't matter.
So here's what matters about industry. Buyers want to hear that you do business in their industry and in their geo and all that. Well, I don't need a buyer persona to tell you that. I just told you that. That was free. Okay, so everybody on the call today.
Hey,
industry
that's free, guys.
Matters. Your buyers want your message plus, and we do that in your industry. That's it.
Right. Move on.
But what?
Yeah.
But what do we do for you?
Right.
Part that matters to buyers. Rarely, not never, but rarely is industry or geography, and often not even job title, that crucial to answering that key question.
And you find this out by Vulcan mind melding with people?
No, we interview them.
You interview them.
Yeah, so we interview them. And that's why I wrote the book, is I wanted everybody to know about the kind of interview that's required, because market research, when I say that term, most people usually think of either surveys, which are absolutely useless for this purpose.
Especially if you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer, right?
Well, and when even more critically, even if you think you know the right question, you're limiting, now you get an answer, that answer is never insightful. It's the follow-up question to that answer. That's an insight. Like, you can have a list of attributes like, well, are all of these important to you? Price, ease of use, integration, flexibility, scalability, service qualities, all this. And people check all the boxes. But what you never get to do in a survey is then take that answer, ease of use is really important, and spend 10 minutes getting the buyer to talk about what that means and how they determine which solution was easy to use. And, what was it about ease of use? And how much training did you expect to have to need before? And so, sure, you can create surveys that have, layers of questions, but it's that dialogue. It's like you and I, Casey, you get this. I know, because you wouldn't just send out a survey and ask me questions.
I want to go get lunch.
It's the dialogue we're having.
Right.
So surveys don't work. Focus groups don't work.
Kill surveys.
It's one-on-one, in-depth conversations, dialogue with the buyer in a very particular way.
So you're killing surveys. Love it. Shots fired. You're killing focus groups. Killing those
for this purpose, not for other purposes, but for this purpose, I'm killing these. Surveys and focus groups have a lot of good purposes, not this one.
Love it. Yep. Okay, great. So no surveys, no focus groups. It's a one-on-one conversation.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Exactly. It's a one-on-one interview, and it's a very particular kind of interview.
Okay, it's particular. Are you writing down? I mean, I've heard unscripted, I've heard scripted, I've heard semi-scripted. What's the best answer there?
So, first of all, what you want to do is get people on the phone who have, within the last year, been in the buying decision.
Okay.
And that's critical. So, a lot of people want to interview their customers. And we don't really, I mean, that's okay to do. And certainly you want to interview your customers about other things, make sure they're happy and so forth after they buy.
Right.
But buyers are different than customers. Buyers are about the buying decision. So we want to interview people about that buying decision. So we want to find people who have made that decision. Ideally, not just your customers, because you did it right with them. You won their business. Right. We really want to talk to people who didn't choose you.
So recent buyers.
Mm-hmm. We go back as much as a year.
Okay. Because otherwise you forget, right? You mumbo jumbo.
Right.
Yeah.
And it takes more skill is all. And then there's one scripted question, and here it is. Take me back to the day when you first decided to evaluate a blank solution, service, product, whatever, and tell me what happened, Casey. Tell me what happened.
Really?
When you first decided that you needed a marketing automation solution, take me back to that day and tell me what happened. And then it's about the dialogue, the probing, and taking those people very slowly through that whole journey.
Right.
Everything they thought about and did is they looked at all their choices, did research on them,
right,
figured out what was included and what they didn't have, and narrowed it until they chose the one they chose.
Interesting. I was going to say, I didn't know very much about it when I first, so I didn't necessarily decide I needed it, but I did decide to look into it.
There you go.
At the moment.
It's when you first decided to evaluate.
Evaluate, yeah.
When you first decided, take me back to the day when you first decided to evaluate a whatever solution or service you sell. So, it's insert. I just pick that because we were talking about marketing.
So I would say something like, everything was really messed up in the company with the leads and sales didn't really like me and things are all messed up. And it took me an hour and a half to send an email out. So I had heard there's better things. So I just started filling out forms for people. So that would be my initial answer. That's
your first answer. Great. Yeah. So now what I'm going to do next, so watch this. We'll do like a little mock interview here. Okay, Casey?
Great.
I'm going to say to you, well, gosh, Casey, the day that you decided to do that, I mean, hadn't that been going on for a long time? Like, what really changed that you decided that today's the day? I mean, I'm guessing that sales have been kind of mad at you for a while and you've been worried about all those things. And
sure. It was a new company. I just joined. And so I hadn't experienced it for a while, but I now suddenly, maybe a week in, realized how messed up. I thought I inherited something wonderful. Instead, I inherited a mess. And so I was like, oh, there has to be a solution. And I guess I'd heard about there were solutions, and I read in an industry paper saying this thing called marketing automation. So I was hoping that it was going to help.
So I'll do a little aside here and say, you guys, we just got to the real trigger.
Okay.
Now, I want you to think about what we just learned. And we wouldn't have learned this in a survey, right?
Right.
But because I stayed with it and asked you what really changed, I just found out, and I can go tell my salespeople that, hey, we know that one of the triggers and I can look at this in my marketing automation. Let's start to watch for people. We can use LinkedIn databases. We've got all sorts of databases. Let's watch for when people join the company in your job title, because this is when they're going to be most receptive to hearing about us.
Right.
So do you see how this helps for targeting?
Totally. And it wasn't the initial question or the question after that. It was, tell me more about that.
It was like staying with you. Yeah.
A new job, and I was hoping for something and didn't really know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm a little bit beyond
Now I'd say to you, okay, Casey, so what did you do first to understand your options?
Right. I just went on a form spree and started filling out every vendor form under the sun. Just went crazy. And I started reading some Forrester papers, I think, about it.
Mm-hmm.
Those two things.
How did you decide which websites to even fill out forms on?
Yeah, it was one of these industry papers that said different products, and it was interesting. One I hadn't looked at, which I work with now, called Pardot. I hadn't even heard of it, but in the paper it said, this is really good for SMBs. And I was like, I am an SMB, so I'm going to go check it out.
You see how we just got a finding there, you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
So the trigger for you was a paper that said marketing automation for SMB.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you started doing forms. And see, we could very slowly walk you through everything you did and thought about as you went from that initial, like filling out millions of forms. Like, Casey, how many do you think you filled out? How many different companies forms?
Probably 8 different marketing vendors.
Yeah. Okay. So now you had 8 companies. You filled out the forms. And then I'd say to you, so then what did you do? And we just very slowly keep walking you through this. You see? So I'm capturing your journey.
Yep.
And as we get further along, what's really critical. So I just found out what your mental model was for figuring out which companies' forms you should fill out.
Right.
It gets even better as we go along, because as you start to exclude certain companies from that consideration set, I can find out what resources influenced that and what those resources were telling you. Like, what perceptions did you start to build about those companies?
Totally. A lot of it was the demos. I was talking to a sales rep right away, and a lot of the demos were really complicated, and I guess they didn't realize that I was completely new to it. I mean, this was a while ago at this point, but I was completely new to it. And so I didn't understand the basic premise, but one of the sales reps said, hey, it's simple: capture, nurture, automate. And then I really liked him, and he was kind of a fun person too. And but he simplified it for me, and I ended up going with that tool. That was the tool I went with, for many different reasons, probably. But he was the one guy of all the haze and the sales speak that just said, this is what this new world is going to be for you in marketing. Mm-hmm. So that really.
So there's so many directions we could go with this conversation, Casey, but if you can imagine now, if you did that for 6, 8, 10 people, you'd start to see that there would be patterns around what drove every part of that decision. And that becomes your persona. And you're capturing, we're recording these interviews, we're having the interviews transcribed.
Sure.
And then we're capturing those verbatim quotes where you get a little emotional. We're getting you a little worked up about this. One of the core principles that I want to tell you about B2B and many consumer marketing around I say it's not B2B versus B2C. It's high consideration versus low consideration.
Love that. Yep. And
so what really happened for you there, the essence of it is that buyer, you came to trust that company.
Totally.
And as marketers, we don't realize that that's our job now. We think we're trying to push out all this information, get more leads, get more qualified leads. No, what we're trying to do is build trust. And it's harder with marketing than it is with that sales engagement.
True.
But ultimately, that's our job, is to figure out how are we going to start to get that buyer to trust it. I mean, started off with you trusted those 8 companies because they were mentioned in a report.
Right.
And it was about SMB. And so that started to build the beginnings of trust. And then you went through a process till you got to trust that you weren't going to, you weren't going to get fired for buying this particular solution.
Right. And you know what, as you mentioned that, I have an example of that not working. I was sharing with someone that I filled out a form to get a case study on marketing automation and AI, and I filled it out. I downloaded. I was eager to get to it, and it was beautifully designed, and it had like marshmallow fluff. It was not helpful. I'm not an idiot. Give me a takeaway. 4 pages, nothing. I closed it. I was like, this is disgusted, right? I was like, and then I even the sales rep who pinged me the very next day, not necessarily a good call, but that's what they did. And he said, hey, la la la. And I just remembered, I don't really trust you guys because you offered me this cool case study, and it ended up being a flop. You just wanted, it was clickbait, and fooled me once. I'm not into the rest of your clickbait. And that was an example of a promise that wasn't fulfilled on the marketing side. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and the sad thing is, and I've been guilty of this myself, is we sit in a room and we're like living in our own echo chamber.
Yeah.
Here's another myth that I'll bust is that we should talk about benefits, not features.
Interesting.
I just want to
Punch
blow that away.
Why is that?
Well, because the benefits you want, what you want. You knew that you wanted, you'd identified when you started on the search for that marketing automation that you wanted to get the salespeople to be happier and you wanted to get more leads. And it's like, don't talk to me about how we're going to do that. Talk to me about, prove to me. And that's the same thing with that AI paper.
Yeah.
Talk to me. Don't talk to me about the benefit of AI. Talk to me about what you can do to deliver value to me in the context of AI and marketing automation. What will AI do for me in terms of what are the capabilities that I'm going to have that I don't have now? So, I usually don't talk about so much benefits or features. I say, we've got to talk about capabilities. And it's like, we can solve this problem because. So we can mention the problem, but we better get quickly to how we solve it. Buyers are a lot more educated than they used to be. And they are really annoyed by what's lost for them now is benefits. We are the market leading provider of flexible, scalable, compatible, interoperable, fully integrated, enterprise-wide solutions for awesome business results.
Agile, user-friendly.
Agile. Oh, yeah, I forgot lean, agile.
Lean.
So, yeah.
Now, I've also heard, though, too often we sell the process and not the result. How does that? Is that just wrong then? Or because I can see getting wrapped up in this is how we're going to come in and we're going to do this interview and this call and this and that.
Yeah, I don't want the process either.
Right.
The real key thing is here, without getting into the high level, is to find out what do those interviews so you find out what your buyers want to know. And you'll find out what are the questions they're asking. And so, I use ease of use because it's something that just about everybody marketers and markets around. And, I go to the website and it says, our products are easy to use. Do you think your buyer shows up and reads that and goes, oh my gosh, this is great. Here's a solution that's easy to use. I haven't seen that anywhere else. Where do I click, right? Instead, what we want to say to them is what's easy to use about this.
What's easy? Okay, so I was going to say, there's two particular marketing automation tools that I know specifically. The main difference is that one is just really hard to use and it takes forever to implement it. And
right.
But
if you're a buyer and you don't know that yet, you don't just go to their website and say, hey, we're easy to use, because the hard to use guys are probably also saying they're easy.
They are saying that. Yeah. Everyone says that. So then how do you suss that out? If that is a big differentiator, does it not even matter if that's not what the buyers are asking?
Well, that's one thing. So we do tend to talk about differentiators just because they're different and without knowing if that's what the buyers are asking. But let's assume my guess is, I think it's a reasonable case that the buyers do care about ease of use. Sure. We want to find out what about ease of use matters to them. Is it the UI? Is it the training? Is it something about the dashboard? I mean, literally, here's an example. You want a story? So my company just bought a workflow automation solution. And my operations executive who went looking for it spent literally weeks and weeks looking at all these different solutions, talking to vendors, and just struggling, trying to find something that was easy to use. Right?
Yeah.
And at the end, finally, after about 6 weeks of this, wasting all this time that we don't have, he finally figured out that the way to figure out what was easy to use, and this is the story he would tell if somebody called up and interview him.
Yeah.
And so this is free, you guys. If anybody on the call right now saw workflow, here it is. Is he finally figured out is he went into Google Images and he typed on dashboards, that he could look at the dashboards and that was a clue, like how they were depicting the dashboard would give him a clue as to what kind of information they were tracking and how it looked. Like, was it too simple or too hard? Because it's actually like something, for every buyer, it's unique, right? And we're trying to figure out what does that mean to our market And that's that's how he found the solution. I mean, he didn't even know like what to call this thing. To call it project management or workflow or
the terms,
terminology. And you know what? I mean, this makes it sound like to the company that sells that solution.
Yeah,
he sounds like he's stupid. Like what? But he's not stupid. He's just never bought anything like this before.
Right. Which is a valid audience, a valid customer potential.
Yeah.
Potential buyer. Yeah.
And so he wasted all the time. So what did I say? We want to reduce the friction in the buying experience.
Right.
We want to be helpful to buyers. We want them to figure out quickly, I have a picture in my mind of what I need at some level or what problem I needed to solve. Don't tell me the benefits. Give me the information. And I don't know what that is till I interview your buyers.
Right.
But give me the information I need to see whether there's a likely good match between what I think I need and what you deliver.
Right. Would that be two different personas then? The experienced buyer versus
could be
someone who.
I have an example of that.
New into that, yeah, sure.
We did a study for Caterpillar. Caterpillar, the guys that make the big old tractors and right.
We're making like Caterpillar visuals for those listeners.
Yeah, like big old cranes. Yeah, skid steers and all these things. And we did a study for them.
Sure.
And they told us they thought they had 5 buyer personas by industry. They had 2 construction industry buyers. They had agriculture, landscaping, and snow removal.
Interesting.
And so we went out and interviewed buyers about their journey and where the friction was in the buying experience and what they cared about and the information they needed that would be helpful. And we found out that they didn't have 5 buyer personas. They had 2.
Huh.
And it came to mind because your question about like, is there a mature buyer and an immature buyer? That would be or a less educated buyer. That would be a good way to describe what we came up in that client, which is, there was a buyer who had bought a ton of this kind of equipment in his life, and he wanted to see side-by-side comparisons. Like, think of if you've ever bought a washing machine or a laptop, with all the features and functions. Well, believe it or not, in tractors, there's stuff like hand controls versus foot controls.
Sure.
The door comes off or doesn't.
Spring bouncy seat. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and like how much can it lift and what kinds of lift ratio? I don't know. All sorts of stuff.
Does it fit a big gulp or does it fit a soda can?
There you go. Yeah, there you go. What's a cup holder like? And the buyer who knows he's going to have to trade this stuff off against price and all these other feature sets wants to see side-by-side comparisons. Totally not available until we did the study.
Interesting.
Then there was a different buyer, completely different, who is got to buy something he's never bought before. And his concern, his journey looks like, hey, I'm a landscaper. I've got a chance to get into the swimming pool building business. I've got a prospect right now who wants a proposal from me tomorrow. But before I can, I need to find out what I need to buy to dig swimming pools.
Yeah.
And I need to get on the phone with a guy right now who can help me. And this was a channel sales thing, and the partners didn't call these guys back for a couple of days. And what did they do? They go to the competitors. They go to Kubota or John
Whoever's
Deere.
More helpful, right? Just
whoever's more helpful.
Yeah. Less friction, more helpful.
Not about industry. Now, when they published their marketing materials, they still needed pictures of farms for the ag guys and snow for the snow guys. But
that would be a different persona, though. You just selling like plows versus grain harvesters, and
it's actually the same product in these cases. Huh. So it literally was the same kinds of products.
Same product. Okay.
But it was how they marketed these products. But they still needed, and this is the part people say to me, "But don't we need to go to market by industry? We know that matters to your buyers." Yes. So the pictures are different, but the strategy, which is what do we say? What do we need to do to be helpful and reduce friction in the buying experience? It wasn't by industry. And that's what the persona should tell us.
And
how to be strategic.
That's what the patterns showed after interviewing multiple people, even from these different
12
groups.
People.
Just 12
people.
To see if they
I think we did 18 in that study. Yeah.
And that showed that even though, snow versus not snow or this versus that, Now, same product, but it showed that they all came up to the decision in a similar way, that the journey was very similar.
Except for this, the friction point and the place where the company wasn't helpful and where these people had questions. And it's a little oversimplification for the purpose of telling the story.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote about it in my book, so there's more detail. But
that's right.
Just to give you the idea that, demographics, job title, industry, company size, are rarely as important as something else you're going to learn about how to be helpful to these buyers.
So it blows my mind a little bit, because in my head I was thinking, and maybe not. Well, if there's different products in different industries, I mean, if it's a different product, does that automatically make a different buyer for a company?
It's a different buying decision altogether. So let's talk about that.
Sure.
So buyers don't buy products; they buy answers to their problems.
Answers, sure.
Yeah. And we know that. You knew that. Yeah. So many times in companies that have multiple products, it's really looking at how does the buyer enter that buying decision, and then are there related products and solutions and services that come together for that? And that's what the interview is about, because the buyer is not looking at this on a product by product basis.
And the cue to separate out a different persona is a different friction point, or different answers?
When we start with the interviews, we do start with demographics.
Okay.
So job title, industry, and a particular set of a particular kind of buying decision,
Right.
And then we find out from the interviews how many personas we really need.
Now, what's the flag that causes you to then say this is a separate one from the one I just talked to?
Some place where the buyer's expectations, their questions, their expectations for that buying experience diverge.
Okay.
Like that Caterpillar example.
Like the Caterpillar. The person who was comparing had bought it before versus the person...
Doesn't want to talk to a sales guy. Just let me go to your website, see this stuff side by side, press the buy button.
Whereas the other one did want to talk to someone. It wasn't about a comparison. It was about, I've never done this before.
Educate me.
Educate me. Yeah.
Consult with me. This is a buyer who needs consultation. He needs help. He needs a guy on the phone who can listen to his story and say, I think given all the things you told me, you need this.
Right.
The other guy who's been bought a dozen of these things, the last thing he wants to do today is talk to a sales rep.
Talk to somebody. Yeah, he's busy.
Just give me the data.
Phone. Yeah, and I can see how problematic that would be for Caterpillar or any company to treat everyone the same.
Yeah.
Right? Now you're probably missing it for both of them. Or at best, maybe you're hitting it for one, hopefully, on a whim. Or maybe you're just talking about yourself the whole time and you're missing it for everyone. Interesting.
Exactly. You got it, Casey.
Boom. Man. Well, how did you get into this? I'm trying to understand the amount of experience on this Zoom meeting. Hey, Zoom, is amazing. And how did this start? I mean, I can literally consider you like the Wonder Woman of buyer insight.
Sure.
So who are you? And how did this start? Like that whole story of, were you just in a coffee shop and you're sitting next to J.K. Rowling and she was writing Harry Potter and you were like, buyer personas, and like you felt compelled to fix marketing? Or, I mean, where did this all sort of come from?
Yeah, well, it's hard to know where to begin. I mean, in my book, I did try to go back and figure that out. But, a long, long time ago, so like literally 1986, I was working for Regis McKenna, which most people are too young to know who that is.
Apple, Intel, right? Launched a couple.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
You got it, Casey.
Smart.
So I worked on the Intel account, but yes, Regis McKenna launched Apple Computer, this little company most of your listeners today might have heard of.
Yeah,
and maybe. And the guy, the Regis McKenna, the person, it was a market research and PR firm, taught me as a young marketer to always interview customers before I wrote positioning statements and marketing messages. And then I went on through my career to own a market research firm and a PR firm.
Why was that? Were you seeing people not do that? Or you were seeing when you did do that, it just changed people's perspectives completely? What sort of triggered you to...
Well, in 1986, honestly, I'm sitting there like feeling like you are today. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm with like these people that are launching these big, I'm like a beginning marketer, and I'm told you will go interview customers before you do this. And I'm like, okay, good. Boss, I'm doing that. It never occurred to me to question that. And, you know, I could go on about Regis McKenna. I mean, the guy was amazing. He wasn't even a marketer. His degree was in phenomenology.
Phenomenology? That sounds awesome. That'd be a great title, too.
Go look it up. Like phenomenon with ology on the end.
Like that.
So I can't explain what phenomenology is, and I definitely don't have a degree in it, but it's the chaos theory is a part of phenomenology. And he was arguably in the 80s, probably the most famous marketing guru. He you know, I mean, doing Intel and Apple obviously gives him a lot of credentials, but
sure.
Yeah, he wrote a lot of books, and I'd read his book, and I wanted to go to work for him, and they hired me, and I'm just sitting there, you know, soaking it in. Okay, boss, this is what I do.
And now he somehow merged chaos theory with marketing research?
No. How did he get into, you know, I couldn't accurately describe how he got into marketing. Yeah. But the principle that he understood and talked about in his first book was called The Regis Touch. And I doubt it's in print. But you could probably find a copy somewhere. But what his principle was, and remember, these are the early days of tech.
Sure.
Nobody knows what tech is. The internet doesn't exist yet. Nobody gives a heck. Everybody, what's a motherboard? Why do I care about any of this technology?
Yeah, this is pre-AOL. This is for those.
It's before Netscape. It's before anything.
This is Apple IIe, you know, for desk.
Yeah, yeah. And so we just found out that I'm old. So now that we got that out of the way,
right?
But what he brought to marketing was, and Jeffrey Moore,
okay.
Some people do know who worked for Regis after I did. So I didn't know Jeffrey Moore from those days, but Jeffrey Moore wrote Crossing the Chasm, which was taking basically a 50s model for market adoption and introducing, because of tech, this idea of early adopters being different and tech being different. But anyway.
So he worked at that company after you did at McKenna?
He worked at Regis McKenna.
Wow, it's like the intersection of, it's almost like the eBay of the days. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So being at the right place at the right time, getting the right mentor.
Right.
And so he taught me this, but the basic principle that he brought to marketing was go influence the influencers, which now we talk about influencer marketing like it's something new, right?
All day long, right? Yep.
But he was really about creating an ecosystem to promote marketing. And that was like the phenomenology aspect of this, as best as I can tell. Regis, if you're listening, I apologize for not doing a good job on this. But
that's okay. We'll have to have him on here to correct it all later on.
Yeah. I don't know if he's still working. He probably doesn't need to anymore. Probably. But at any rate, that was my big beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went on to do a lot of things. I owned a market research firm. I went in-house as a VP of marketing for about 11 years, and I ran sales for a little while. And that was another important inflection point. For
sure. Yep.
And I don't know how many of your listeners have been in sales, but, you know, as a salesperson and then running sales, I really learned about the magic of listening to the customer and answering their questions. And that had a lot to do with me later coming around to this model of buyer personas, because as a rep, and I was only a quota carrying rep for less than a year, but I was at 400% of my quota because I was crushing it because I just sort of natively like to listen to people and caught on to that. And, you know, I would basically present the information in the context where they could hear it and answer their questions, and they trust me and buy from me.
Right. I think you also probably had a little bit of edge to make sure they bought from you after you did your listening. It's like, okay, I've listened to you. Now you're going to sign that thing. In fact,
I think I had less edge in those days, but
the edge has just grown over time. But, I completely agree. I think if I could even say birds of a feather in this, I was in marketing for a long time, then had a chance to to do work in sales, even just try out sales. I mean, I've sold tuxedos and all sorts of weird things like that. Nothing teaches you sales like trying to sell a future bride a tuxedo for her wedding day. It's crazy, but doing that, it makes you appreciate so much more that sales side, the aspect of the human interaction, the trust in person, so that when you go on the marketing side, it's almost like trust at scale. And you also have respect for the other side too, because a lot of time, I'm sure you deal with this too. Sales is horrible. Marketing's the best. We should take over everything. Or sales is like, what do we even need marketing for? We'll just go cold call a bunch of people, And so it's like, actually, the solution is somewhere in between there, with you guys working together, aligning, and it takes someone who's had fun at both sides, and can see the value in the different elements to kind of bridge that gap, if you will.
Yeah, I think it was part and parcel of me inventing this business. I don't know if you have to do that to be successful at it, but I think because my vision, and I wrote about it in the last chapter of my book, is that the one thing, I love what you say, trust at scale. That was excellent. Yeah. Marketing is about persuading a market full of buyers. Sales is about persuading one buyer at a time.
Right.
We both are in the job of persuading buyers, and that's done by earning their trust.
Right. Right.
And so if we could just align around that, and that if we could all agree that, there's probably different tasks and activities involved in earning the buyer's trust,
right,
then maybe we could sort out like our different roles a little better.
Quite literally on the same team, maybe we have different terminologies and different cultures. Sales is out till 2 a.m. Maybe marketing calls it a night at 11, but either way, we're still trying to, and ideally, in a positive way, we're trying to help that buyer out, not trick them into clicking our email or trick them into buying it or push them, or, as learned in the previous podcast, beat them up and take their keys at the car dealership until they get fatigued and they buy from us, but to really help them out. So that's interesting. Yeah, I could see how working on both sides of that would really just give you that ability to create what you've done.
Good.
So now you've got dogs and you're living on an island and you're continuing this charge of leading and speaking. Where can people go to? And it's sort of self-explanatory. I mentioned that your Twitter, but where should people go to follow up on this? Certainly your book. What do you recommend?
Well, I got lucky. In 2006, I started a blog at buyerpersona.com.
Boom.
And I hadn't started my company yet, but when I started my Buyer Persona Institute 4 years later, I already had the domain. And so buyerpersona.com is the headquarters, the central spot.
Excellent. So just go there and...
Yeah, because we've got links to the book. We've got templates. We've got videos. We've got an online course. We've got all sorts of things you can do there to either, do it yourself,
right,
or invite us to come in and do this work for you.
I can see a lot of us adding that, and we'll definitely link to that as well. But it's easy; just type it in now if you're listening. But we just stirred the pot, right? We just challenged the. But I had Mandy with her photo, and it was so cute, and these are designed so well, and I did what Google told me to do. But we're saying no, and now you got to do some interviews, and it sounds like I could, we could look up some training or some videos in your online course on how to really perfect that. Because it is a guided conversation that it takes a little bit of leadership to do and some confidence to be able to ask those questions. Especially, I guess you got to have a willing buyer who's listening, game for answering your questions.
Yeah, and so when I wrote my book, I know a lot of business authors tend to write just a lot of, this is a great idea, and here's a bunch of case studies. I didn't mention, but for 10 years, 2000 to 2010, I owned a training business.
Sure.
And I traveled all over the world teaching a 2-day course on product marketing. And so I'm a trainer at heart.
Yes.
And so in my book, a third of the book is dedicated to literally everything you need to do to find people to interview, get them to agree to interview, conduct the interview, work with the transcripts to build the personas. I just really people said to me, "You're crazy giving away all this intellectual property." I'm like, no, I don't think so. It still takes a lot of skill, and not everybody can get good at it.
For sure.
But I really want people who, if you have a background in journalism, if you're the kind of person who's really comfortable at parties, meeting people you don't know and just chatting them up, if you're an anthropologist by training, if you've got any of that kind of like, you'd love to get in and just really listen and probe and look for that patterns, then it's all laid out how to do it yourself.
That's interesting because it definitely breathes life into the idea of journalists who maybe you're not at the local paper anymore. How can you reinvent yourself or use that? You didn't lose that knack for wanting to get to the bottom of things. So now you can sort of change that over and move it to buyer personas. That's really cool. And you also have the heart of a trainer. I love that. I do too. In our company, why is to teach a better way. And it's funny when you mention, people giving you flack for giving away too much content, but it's like, this is what I do. I love those aha moments. And I'm sure you've seen me have about 80 of them. I'm almost having a seizure over here with all these aha moments. But this has been great. Any other parting shots or any other things, takeaways you want us to remember? Next
I'll just say that the persona. Let me do a parting shot here because, people will often think that having a buyer persona is like check the box. Okay, my persona's done. Yes. I'm good. And I'll tell you it's really the persona is just the beginning. Personas are a decision-making tool, so we can decide how to be helpful to buyers. And, especially for the companies that are a little bit bigger, actually getting the organization to leverage those personas. And we're starting to do a lot of work with clients around the strategy afterwards. And chapter 8 in my book is all about how to kick that off.
Okay.
And by the way, it sounds like I'm selling the book here, you guys. My publisher makes all the money on my book. I make like 75 cents every time you buy a copy. So I'm not doing
no worries. No, for sure. I just chapter 8. Go ahead.
I want people to have access to that. But I will tell you that the parting shot is, gosh, don't feel like you're done when you have the persona done. It's now you've got to get people to use this. I'll tell you a short story again. Do we have enough time for another short story?
Sure.
Okay. So Jeff Bezos of Amazon, right?
Sure.
Arguably a pretty successful guy. When he started Amazon, not very many people know this, but he insisted that at every meeting there be an empty chair in the room. And that was to remind the people in the room to think about the customer.
Right.
And now the chair's not empty anymore. Now he has customer experts sitting in every meeting, bringing the customer perspective to that meeting. And you can read about this. Go Google, Jeff Bezos, empty chair, da-da-da. Forbes did a great article update on it a couple of years ago and talked about how, senior VPs at Amazon, these guys probably making big bucks, lots of stock. They're at a meeting and the person in the customer chair kind of frowns and starts to look like this. And people in the meeting actually cringe because they know that at Amazon, it's customer first.
Customer first,
and this is really talk about, I want to change B2B marketing? I do. I want that company to think like Jeff Bezos. I want people to say, we're going to invite the customer into every meeting. And the persona is the representation of that. And we need proxies for the persona throughout the company, sitting in every meeting and making better decisions because the customer is there.
I love that. When I got the big takeaway, it's a decision-making tool. And I could even see, it's not a checkbox. Okay, I got them done. And now they just sit somewhere. That's the question. Do you have them done? Are you using them? Are they actually helpful? And if it's that fluffy stuff that we talked about earlier, how would you even use that? Mandy, what is she doing? Poor Mandy's out there listening on like, stop making fun of me, Casey. Pick on someone else. But the fact that Mary, there we go. Mary, you're up now. It's up to you now, Mary. A decision-making tool, almost like the why for a company, or in this case, the proxy for the customer. I love that. If you can't get the customer in a chair, you put that piece of paper or that persona in the chair, and it's like, what would their customer say to this particular situation? Or we have a choice. Should we create this content or should we create this content? Well, it's not about what makes us look good. What would our buyers say? Let's consult the persona. And so it's an effective persona if it's helping you answer those questions and advocate reduce friction. That's interesting. Yeah.
And companies have customer councils and so forth that they sometimes try to use for this. This is better than that.
Better.
Because customer councils, people are still advocating for their own company.
Yes.
This is really, I don't want that customer in the room because now I'm going to get that company's perspective, that customer. I want something that represents how a market full of buyers or customers think.
Which you can get when you've interviewed 10 multiple ones and you've met.
Which seems like a small number. People are shocked that number is so small.
Yeah.
And certainly if you're making, a make or break decision for your company, you might want to go out and validate those findings using a survey. There's where surveys come in. But we charge by the interview for our clients, so we'll do as many as people ask us to do. And we've discovered that after the 10th interview, unless we're doing a segmentation study where we're looking at different types of buyers,
sure,
we don't learn enough new. There's like this, this real great hockey stick where we're learning, and then by the time we get to the 11th, there's a drop off where maybe we'll learn something, but the sort of return on investment from the 11th interview and beyond just doesn't warrant it.
And maybe it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you think about it, it's at least an hour conversation, right? If not more.
Actually, we schedule these interviews. That's another thing. If you've got a really skilled researcher, we schedule them with people for half an hour because it's easier to schedule it.
True.
But most buyers, we can't get them off the phone.
They're finally being heard and understood, and they don't They don't want to stop telling you what they went through. Yeah.
We schedule a half an hour, and most of our interviews last at least 40 minutes. Some of them go up to an hour.
Sure. Oh, that's fascinating. Now I want to go do that. I want to go interview some people. That's exciting.
Hey, Then it worked, and that was my purpose.
Yeah. Like all the magic, just even talking to me, and I wasn't pretending. Those are my real answers. And the 3 or 4 nuggets we got just from that casual conversation, and I purchased it multiple years ago. So, oh man, with the treasures you could unlock by having some recent buyer within a year, a year sooner, buyers, and not just your own buyers, like you said, but people that have bought maybe something else if they're willing.
Bought from your competitors, or just stayed. Like a lot of companies, their biggest competitor is the status quo.
True. It's easy to just keep doing what we're doing now. It's not making us better, but it's not making us worse. So we're just going to keep doing that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So people that thought about it and then stopped. Why did they stop? So it's really, I'm telling you, you're right, Casey. I'm glad you saw that because sometimes I say that this work is almost like cheating.
Sure.
Because, once you know what the buyers want, then we just have to give them the answers that are useful.
Yeah.
All that stuff. So my book is dedicated, literally, when I was writing the book, Wiley came in and they said, oh, you need to write a dedication. I was so tired of writing. I was like, oh, just go away. And I was probably partly my mood and partly that I get a little, I do have a little edge these days. And so I dedicated my book. It literally says, this book is dedicated not to my dogs, not to my husband, but this book is dedicated to every marketer who questions the wisdom of making stuff up.
Questions the wisdom. Love
of making stuff up.
I think that's the place to call it a day. That's beautiful. The power. I need to end this. I need to go start interviewing people right now. So
there you go.
Adele, thank you so much for this. Everyone, you've heard buyerpersona.com. The book, the link to the book on there. Is there an Audible version of that? Is there like a...
No, Wiley hasn't published an Audible version. Yeah,
all right.
They own it. So
get the highlighters out, everybody. Go get that. Hit up the buyerpersonas.com. Thank you so much again for coming. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Casey. It was a pleasure, I assure you.
Awesome, everyone. Well, we will catch you on the next one. Take care, everyone.